All right, if you were from, I'm going to run through some of the questions we've had in the last couple of weeks that we didn't get to that maybe are somewhat new and haven't talked about over the last few weeks. One of them is a question from a viewer in St. Paul who wants to know whether or not the legislature has any role to play in the proposed Polymet copper-nickel mine decision, or will that decision to permit the mine be left to the EPA, DNR, and perhaps other agencies? Who wants to take a run at the mining question?
Well,
Representative Norris, I guess by geography you're closest, right?
I did sit in on a presentation by the company. In Fergus Falls, the Chamber of Commerce hosted a meeting so we could better understand, what the proposal is and how large the project is. Although we're not anywhere close to where that would be taking place, and I found it very informative. And I guess coming away from that, it's not clear to me, where that final decision is going to be made. To me, it should be made. I think that it's really a good thing for the state of Minnesota. The concern seems to be environmental and the long-term effects of whatever they're doing up there to get those minerals out. And so I think that probably the EPA is going to be a major part of this thing, but I think for the betterment of the state, that project needs to move forward. So.
Yeah, I just would say, they're going through the permitting process, and that's been a long and drawn-out, very deliberative process. You do hear a lot of concern about water quality and how that would ultimately be handled on the environmental side. So I'm a little bit cautious about it, to say the least. I think we have to have several questions answered before we would move ahead with that, and that's the purpose of the permitting process, to make sure that we do have proper balance. The residents up there, I understand, are kind of divided. You've got those that are very interested in opening mining. You have those that are very interested in their tourism businesses and so on. And so there is a little tug-of-war there, to say the least, between the residents. And where it'll ultimately be resolved, I think, as Representative Norris pointed out, is still to be determined.
I think, and just add one more thing to what I said earlier, the jobs are important that it would bring to that area. But it makes me wonder if we were going back in time to when iron ore was discovered up there and we were dealing with today's regulatory environment, would we have ever mined up there? Would we have ever taken that ore out of that ground? I mean, that's the question that comes to me, because today it's much more difficult, it seems, to do something that, in all indications are, it's relatively safe, and it's just in theory that it may not be so. Anyway, just wanted to add.
And Representative Norris makes a good point in terms of where we would have been, 60, 70, 80 years ago. But obviously what's happened during that time is that people are that much more aware of environmental concerns. I think Lynn hit the nail on the head in terms of talking about water quality. Every one of us takes huge pride in Minnesota water. The streams, the lakes, the recreational water that we have, the park territory, the federal land in the boundary waters. And there's some significant concerns, certainly in my district, as to what happens to the water quality and what's going to be there, not for today or tomorrow, but for generations to come. And it's not to suggest that there should not be a concern about employment in the north as well as any other sector, any other part of the geography of the state. I would guess that we're not going to have any action during this year's legislative session. But the expectation would be that at some point there could be some very significant requirements placed on the company to make sure that there's environmental protection for whatever happens. If they want the mining and they want the benefits of the mining, they also have to take into account what the possible consequences, negative consequences might be, and take the responsibility for that.
Certainly the people of northeast Minnesota are no strangers to mining. And as we go forward, obviously, as it was mentioned, that there's a vigorous process in the permitting of a mine, and certainly that will continue. And you alluded to whether or not the legislature would be more involved. Certainly as we have seen various events occur in the past couple of years, I would assume that one party or another doesn't like the final decision of the permitting authorities, that certainly there will be an attempt to bring the legislature into it again.